Hi, Sirwan. Welcome to AhvalTV. Sirwan Kajo is Washington-based journalist and closely watching and following Kurdish politics in the region, and now especially in Afrin. We are here today to get the latest about Afrin from Afrin, also in the Western world. So let me go into my first question, Sirwan. What are you hearing from Afrin? I know that you have many local sources in Afrin. Today is the third day of operation, Turkish operation. What do you hear from ground?
Thank you for having me, Ilhan. Well, for the third day, many places, especially on the outskirts of Afrin, have been hit by Turkish warplanes. Now, I spoke with a few people today, and they gave me some information. People who were actually stationed in YPG held outposts just outside the city, and they told me that those news reports in the pro-government media in Turkey were false. That these villages have been controlled by the Turkish army and their allied Syrian forces, Syrian rebel forces. The people that I spoke with were YPG fighters, and they said they're being based there since the airstrikes have begun. So that's the latest. But also a number of civilians were killed today. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that 21 civilians, including children and women, were killed since the start of these airstrikes. But the Syrian Democratic Forces and People's Protection Units, the YPG, say that the number hasn't exceeded 18, mostly civilians. There are skirmishes in some places between Turkish forces and their allied Syrian rebels on one side, and the YPG on the other side. They have been trying to basically besiege Afrin from most of the border areas and parts of eastern frontier of Afrin, especially near Azaz, where pro-Turkish-backed rebels are in control. But so far, according from these very sources that I spoke with earlier today, that all these attempts have failed.
Let me press one issue. You are telling us that there are no villages taken over by Turkish army or Turkish army allied forces?
So yeah, that's what the YPG says, at least. I mean, two villages were tried to be overrun by the Turkish army and their allied forces, Syrian forces, but the YPG was able to thwart those attempts, and so far, no villages that are part of the Afrin canton are under the Turkish control or the control of pro-Turkish militias.
Interesting. Were you able to talk to any civilians on the ground? How is the daily life right now on the ground in Afrin?
Well, people are very scared, obviously. There's been shelling for the past week, and the airstrike just started 3 days ago, but the shelling started way much earlier than that, especially on those border villages. The city of Afrin itself hasn't been as targeted as a number of border villages. People are kind of used to this type of situation. I spoke with a number of people, including teachers, lawyers, some local reporters who talk to people themselves. And they all say life goes on almost normally. Let's not forget that Afrin has been under siege since early 2015, when several rebel groups controlled the Azaz. Of course, came after. It only increased after the start of Operation Euphrates Shields that was launched by Turkey. And on the southern frontier of Afrin, a number of Syrian regime units are in control. On the western side, that's where Idlib is located. That's also controlled by Nusra and other extremist groups. So people are used to this kind of environment. Now it is only different this time because there are airstrikes involved. Afrin has been untouched. The city has been untouched since the start of the Syrian uprising. But the surrounding has been used to this type of attacks. So obviously this is a new development for them. People, I'm not sure to what extent they can.
I wanted to clarify one thing. You are telling us that, or I might have misunderstood. Has there been any airstrikes in the city center of Afrin, or the strikes also airstrikes only conducted around Afrin?
Well, the initial airstrikes were, they targeted YPG outposts on the outskirts of Afrin, but now we have some news that, at least from the people that we spoke with, that some civilian residential areas have been hit by Turkish airstrikes as well.
Center of Afrin also. Okay,
correct.
I just wanted to, according to your sources, of course,
Sure.
yes. Still need to be confirmed. So we have very limited time left. Let me go quickly about this UN Security Council meeting today. What should we expect? I think it should start in next few hours. What will happen there?
Well, this is an offensive that has been condemned by almost every single nation in the international community, including Russia, the United States, France, and many other Western powers. So basically, the meeting, which was also requested by France, will be heading in that direction. Now, I don't know how the inside dynamics will work out, whether Russia or China will do something as permanent. I mean, Russia and China's, we don't know their clear position from what's going to happen in the future, because this will also affect the future of the crisis in other parts of Syria. It's true, it's about Afrin, and Afrin has been central in the recent discussions between the Turks and the Americans, the Turks and the Europeans. But it's really about how Russia will look into this in the future.
Okay, my final question. There are some news reports saying that McGurk, U.S. anti-ISIS high representative in Kobani, have you been able to confirm that news? And also, how do you think the U.S.-Turkish relations will be affected? Today, Erdogan again slammed U.S. government for the same reasons for the support the U.S. government has been giving to Syrian Kurds for a long time.
Right. So the very presence of Brett McGurk in Kobani is indicative of how the U.S. is standing on this equation. The U.S. is opposing the Turkish airstrikes, the Turkish offensive on Afrin. But the U.S. was clear since the beginning that Afrin does not fall under its jurisdiction, and it doesn't. We have come to understand that Afrin is part of the Russian influence sphere. So anything that comes on the eastern Euphrates is under the control and the influence of the United States. So McGurk's visit to Kobani, and we don't know, he probably he could visit the other places such as Qamishli and other Kurdish-held areas in the next few days. So that is to affirm the U.S. commitment to protect and support the Kurdish forces in that part of northern Syria. But it is a sign.
It looks like Turkey is going to go after Manbij next time.
Yeah, I mean, things are escalating and the situation is very, rapidly revolving. Now, just today we heard about Turkish artillery attacking YPG locations in 3 other cities in eastern Euphrates, that is Serekaniye, Raslain, Amude, and Derik. Now, that's a big development if it continues. I spoke with several people in these 3 cities, and they all told me that the attacks stopped. It was only for a few hours. But if it does, then it will be a major development, because Turkey has been focusing on Afrin, and this is not just recently. Since 2012, Turkey has been so opposed to having a Kurdish presence in Afrin, and they were so Turkey was kind of okay with the Kurds and YPG and PYD controlling anything that runs from Kobani all the way to the border with Iraqi Kurdistan.
Okay, Sirwan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.